Hi all, I have a very exciting game to show you from the World Championship candidates. This was from the 19th of March, which is yesterday from the time of this video. Hikaru Nakamura, 2790, playing against Veselin Topalov, 2780. So Nakamura had suffered in the previous round, but there was a rest day, thankfully. But he'd suffered in the previous round to Levan Oronian with a touch move rule violation. But it was a difficult position he had been in anyway. But yeah, let's see what happened in this game against Topalov. D4 from Hikaru, and we have Slav defense. Now here, modest continuation E3, which does hem in the bishop. Also popular in this position is knight C3, but E3 is very popular as well. Bishop F5, knight C3, E6. It seems very logical, the play from Black's perspective, to get the bishop out of C8 into the game, looking at B1. Looks useful, but it is subject to attack here without any pigeonhole retreat available. Without further ado, it's attacked, and this is the main theoretical move to try and grab this bishop. It usually does go to G6 now. For those interested on bishop G4, we could try and exploit B7 here. This is popular with queen B3, and it's thought to be okay for white, quite good for white. We can still hit this bishop and win the bishop, and cover up the light square weaknesses with bishop G2 protecting against knight G4. So that kind of continuation is also kind of well worked out. So anyway, but here, yeah, the most popular move is bishop G6. Just saying, okay, take my bishop, and that is taken. And here, often G3 is played, which seems fairly logical to put more pressure potentially on center, and maybe break with E4 later. But quite a curious move. Instead, only 11 games in the live book, Rook B1. It has certain idea that often white wants to play for C5. But if white plays C5 immediately, there's a classic undermining recipe, B6, and then hitting here. And then the problem is revealed that the A1 rook is in the tactical liability, so that loses the rook. So that kind of concept, though, of playing for C5 is indicated as being more practical now after Rook B1. And the bishop had been eyeing that, has gone from the board. It had been eyeing B1, it's gone from the board, so why not? Knight Bd7, and now C5. Black puts a discouraging move for B4 here in playing A5. A3, B4 wants to be played, bishop E7. And it's here that G3 is played. G3. The thing is, putting the bishop traditionally on the square like D3, Black wants to play E5 and potentially E4. That would be with tempo. So G3 has some perk to it. It doesn't get harassed with tempo later. And also the bishop could be useful on G2 anyway. But Black plays this E5 immediately now. This is often a thematic break against this kind of committed pawn structure, to try and break in the center, try and weaken D4, or use the E file. White now plays bishop G2. And instead of ED, instead of that, actually Black has another interesting alternative plan, which is to emphasize white's light squares. Try and weaken white on the light squares. Black plays E4. So if ever white plays F3, Black could actually take, and then there's a backward pawn to play on, and that E4 square would be nice for Black potentially. White plays on the queen side again with B4 here. We have A takes, A takes. And Topalov himself has played on the white side of this against Vladimir Kramnik, and starts to use some of Kramnik's ideas with Black. And one nifty idea, instead of casting, which would close up the F8 square, use that immediately for a knight maneuver, knight F8 to come to the center. And from there it can go into these light squares. For example, here and here are eyed. B5, knight E6, bishop D2. You might think, does this plan of b5 have much venom? Well, it creates a potential entry point on b7 for the rook. Structurally, black will be a bit more fragile with potentially vulnerable pawn on c6. It has some perks to it, this kind of positional plan. Black castled here. And now we see knight a5, another idea, knight b6, and then taking, for example. But black plays knight g5, so looking at the f3 square and h3. Perhaps really cautious here would just be to castle. It does seem plausible just to castle. Although the knight is only held by the queen, it does mean this is possible. And white queen can't take on f3 without losing a4. But this kind of position should be okay as long as this pawn's eyed. It's going to be some time for black's queen to emerge to g2. The knight is also stopping any use of these squares. So this position is playable, it seems. For example, like this, and we can take there, and that's fine. End of attack for black. So castling would seem a sensible idea, and a crazy engine suggestion, you might think it's completely crazy, instead of castling, is bishop b4, which does support c5, and that's interesting because black might be interested in a thematic break, a sacrificial break, might be. And in fact, okay, the move played was actually h4 though, instead of those two. And now we have knight f3 check, bishop takes, e takes, so the white queen can't take without losing the knight. The knight is about to retreat, but first b takes, now knight c3. So threatening, queen takes f3. But here, the knight releasing the pressure on c5, Topalov, guess what? I hope you can guess. Plays, yep, 5 seconds. I have given a clue. If he doesn't do something energetically, his pawn on f3 is lost. So bishop takes c5. He's trying to open up the position against the white king. This is taken, d4, and it's pretty scary stuff. We have e takes d4. White has to go in for this really. If white castles, then black's going to be absolutely fine, and that knight's going to be good. Black will get the piece, and that'll be fine. So e takes. But here's a juncture where you might think rook e8 as well as queen takes d4. Queen takes d4 was played here. It's interesting to consider rook e8. This is pretty sharp as well, because here rook a3 poses some difficult questions for white. Rook b3 takes here. Even this position is a dangerous variation. For example, if castles, rook takes e3. This line shows a lot of dangers. Here gets mated on g2. This is just a theoretical line, and here after knight h5, black's actually doing well. The thing is, in this line, black is not necessarily winning, because in this position there's actually knight d1 as an improvement. I don't know how much of this was seen by both players, or if this led to a rejection of rook e8, but this position seems okay for white after knight d1. So it's razor sharp stuff. Queen takes d4 was the choice instead of the rook e8 check, but it has to be considered. Rook e8 check. White castles, queen g4. Now black really is holding on to f3 at the moment. He really wants to deflect the queen away from f3 so that queen h3 mates on g2, or knight g4 for mating on h2. We have a very, very careful move here, rook e1. If a natural looking move, bishop e3, you might think to get out of any pin, don't be in a hurry sometimes to unpin, because here, pardon me, on bishop e3 there's rook fd8, and if the queen moves away from f3, then that's pretty terminal stuff, mating on g2 there. So no hurry. The queen is very important to eye f3. We have rook e1, which creates also some ideas of rook e3 to try and wrench out this pawn. Rook fd8. So rook takes d2 and queen h3 is threatened. That's parried with rook b2 to be able to take like this. rook d4, and as though black's going to double, seems very logical. A counter-attack move, rook e7, which is reminiscent of an earlier round where Karyakin was white against Nakamura and ended up forking f7 and b7, if you remember, in an earlier round. So f7 is a bit of a soft spot to bear in mind in the variations of many games generally. Here it's not protected except for the king protecting f7, so it means now after rook ad8, white can play queen b3, threatening queen takes f7 and queen g7 mating. Black goes back, and it looks as though there might be a draw now after queen d1, rook fd8, queen b3, rook f8. But here, Nakamura actually plays a different move, knight d1. So he's still got an eye on f3 from there. So if queen h3, we can take on f3. Now, it's a very, very interesting position here. Black played knight d5. The engine's come up with something here. It's not as if it's without attacking resources, but for very strange reasons. The underlying this is the brute force effect. This is there's a fantastic move available for black, but unless you see all the variations underneath it, it's very difficult to appreciate what on earth it does. If I gave you this as a quiz question, what would you play here with black? What would you consider in this position? The engineers do find something which might be favourable for black. So if I give you 5 seconds time from now, can you see a resource for black? Okay. Apparently queen f5. It introduces ideas like rook h4 and rook d3. Rook d3 again for queen h3 idea. So if say rook e3, rook takes h4. This is really dangerous. If here, well, let's have a look at this position. Just for those theoretically interested, let's take that further. Rook e3. Okay, it does actually parry rook takes h4 because we can take on f3, removing the threat, and that'd be fine for white here. Otherwise, taking is pretty terminal, as you might expect. Check and mating like this. But no, rook e3 you'd think dispenses of rook takes h4. But here, black can now switch his attention to the d file. This issue here, and this is going to be good for black. Black is slightly better here from an engine perspective. This position here, it's got his material back, and it's nicer for black. Not the end of the world for white. We're talking a small device for black, but yeah, that was the way to play it. It seems queen f5, fascinating move. These ideas like rook takes h4. On knight e3, queen h3, there's actually knight g4 coming around now. So even though g2's protected, knight g4 is coming around. If here, not knight g4 in this position because the queen takes f3. So that parries knight g4, but here now knight d5, and this would be tricky for white. For example, knight takes is mate. That knight has the hold here. Queen here, we take the rook. Yeah, it's very, very complicated, the implications of queen f5 basically. It's very complicated, but it seems whatever white does, there's a bit of trouble here. Bishop g5, there's rook d3, trying to hold f3. So if the queen moves, we take on d1 check there. So if the queen tries to hold d1, we just go queen h3. And if knight e3, then we've got knight g4 with a forced mate coming up. So yeah, an incredible, I mean, it shows its testimony. It's a testament that black had a decent position. It really is. Black has a decent position here, in theory at least. But I played knight d5, hitting the rook, instead of this queen f5. We have now rook e5. And now black really wants to deflect the queen away from f3 to be able to play this, but unfortunately it's check at the moment. So we see this move king h7, so with the idea to get the queen away, so we can play queen h3, black can play queen h3, but it gives white time to play king h2 defensively to stop that direct queen h3, the king's defending himself. And now knight e3 is also on the cards. We have knight f6, and now bishop e3, white's holding himself together here, it seems, and it's a difficult position here for Topalov. He goes a bit crazy here with that original, the same sort of idea, rook b8 to justify king h7. But what else in this position? Let's have a quick look at this one as well. Very complicated tactical game, this one. If the rook moves back, white's in the driving seat now, it seems technically. Either rook b1 or rook g5. For example, rook g5, get the queen out of there. I know it looks as though knight g4 is dangerous, but we're hitting the queen now. If knight g4, we can actually play this. We've got defensive resources like that, where the queen and knight's attacked. So this kind of position is okay, as long as g4 is covered. That's an important element there against knight g4. Oh, okay, so bishop e3, yeah, black is on the back foot. So we mentioned rook d7, rook g5 there. You know, if rook e4, we can take this, and then, although this looks scary here, this kind of position, there's defensive resources now for white. Bishop d2. If ever any queen h3, there's knight e3 here, and we're covering g4 from both pieces, and g2's covered. Yeah, I mean, it's precise defense all the time, but white ends up like better. But okay, in the game we have a move which kind of hastens to the end. Rook b8. Let's turn off that a bit. So rook b8, trying to distract the queen. Queen takes b8, and the idea, rook takes d1. Now threatening, yes, you might have guessed from the arrows, but just to quickly test you again, okay, you've seen the arrows. What's black's immediate threat here? If you had black, I'll give you 5 seconds. There was a clue in the arrows. That's the clue. Black is immediately threatening queen h3 check here, just to show that, for example, here, and then rook h1 checkmate. So white defends that idea with rook b1, holding the h1 square, so there's no queen h3. We have queen d7, now threatening knight g4 check, adding that. So here, again, tricky, but the principal threat, knight g4 check, is addressed elegantly with rook g5, which may be what Topalov missed. Rook g5 holds g4. If the routine rook takes d1, that's not good because of knight g4 check, and black will be winning here. For example, here, mate, or this discover check doesn't help white scores because we'll get mated. Yeah, so basically a good defensive move again. Rook g5, just stopping knight g4 check, and white's just winning now. We have knight e4, rook takes d1, white is just material up, queen f4 now, holds everything together. It's keeping an eye on f3 again, so if the queen dares move to try and mate, we've got queen takes f3. If we look at this final position, let's just see the resources. So just to spell them out, queen f1, knight, queen takes f3, that's fine, it's piece up for white at least. So what else does black do? Does he take here? hg, we're holding f3 again, and it's all falling to bits. Take here with bishop d4 and stuff to follow. Yeah, there's nothing here for black in this position. So queen f4, that was it. That's a really strong move, queen f4. Any other moves which they don't really help. White's got to be able to put the pressure on that fawn pawn So I think this game was kind of instructive actually, and interesting from a particular perspective about managing the opponent's dangerous form pawn. Try and keep an eye on it under all times and all as maximum number of circumstances. So even actually trying to get out of the pin was rejected. White kept a very careful eye on this pawn throughout a lot of the tactical variations of the game. And even in the final position, that was echoed with Queen F4, just keeping an eye on this dangerous form pawn. If ever Black got a chance with Queen F1, then it's standard mate on G2. So being able to take that pawn, essential, even in the final position. I hope you got something from this game. And yeah, Nakamura is one of my favourite players. I don't think he meant any bad will with his, touch move, Jadub thing from the previous one. We'll have a look at that at some point to see the rook and pawn ending, etc. That might be worth analysing. But for me personally, I like Naka's style of play, etc. I like his openness and availability. Players of all strengths can play him often on the ICC or in real life. He's always keen for blitz games and stuff. So he's one of my favourite GMs. And if in real life, if you ever met him, I think you'd think that as well. He's just very open and friendly, as far as I can see. And it's an unfortunate incident that was involved in with Aronian. Unfortunate touch move violation. But, he held his hand up about it, and it wasn't a big deal, really, in the scheme of things. So I'm glad he bounced back. I know at the expense of Topalov is also a very exciting player. And credit to Topalov for making it very, very exciting, with his bishop sack. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.